Hello and welcome to another lesson of U.S. history. Today, if you're following along as an AP U.S. history student, we are looking at topic 1.4. Now, topic 1.4 addresses some really big concepts: the Columbian Exchange, Spanish exploration, and conquest. Now, because it's such a large amount, I have actually decided to split this into two separate videos. So today we're just going to be looking at the Columbian Exchange. If you are following along with the course exam description, the learning objective that you're going to want to pay attention to is that today we want to explain the causes of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on Europe and the Americas during the period of 1492. So here we see a specific term being inserted into the learning objective, so that should really clue you into what you should be paying attention for. So this is a cause and effect objective. Additionally, there are quite a few sections of the outline that are being covered. So we want to pay attention to how the Columbian Exchange brought new crops to Europe from the Americas, which stimulated European population growth and a new source of mineral wealth, which facilitated the European shift from feudalism to capitalism. So this section of the outline is focused on how the Columbian Exchange impacted Europe. This next part says improvements in maritime technology and more organized methods for conducting international trade, such as joint stock companies, help drive changes to economies in Europe and the Americas. So this one is referencing how the Columbian Exchange was allowed or able to take place. And then the last section that it's addressing, Spanish exploration and conquest of the Americas, were accompanied and furthered by widespread deadly epidemics that devastated native populations and by the introduction of crops and animals not found in the Americas. So this one is more focused on how the Columbian Exchange affected the Americas. So as I've mentioned in a previous video, when you look at the learning objective, the part of the outline should actually answer the question. So we're looking for the causes of the Columbian Exchange and the effect. And then we have here our outline addressing those exact ideas. Now I'm going to dive into those a little bit more now. We're going to start by reviewing the motives for exploration, the first encounters between our indigenous peoples of the Americas and the Europeans. We're going to talk about this important term, the Columbian Exchange, how that impacted Europe, and then we're just going to begin to introduce how it began to impact the Americas. So first, this is a slide from a previous lesson where we looked at the causes of European exploration. If you remember, we were focused on the 3 G's: God, gold, and glory. Why did Europeans want to explore a new area? Well, many of them say it's because of God. They want to spread their religion. They want to spread Catholicism. They want to spread Protestantism. They want to compete against the spread of Islam that was occurring in the Middle East and Africa and Europe at this time. And so some say their motive is to spread religion. More importantly, however, is going to be the gold motivation, and this is just referring to wealth. They want to bring wealth to themselves and their kingdoms. And glory. Additionally, there's a lot of nationalism and competition between nations, and selfishly wanting to bring glory to their own names. So this age of discovery begins. We see Vasco da Gama taking the first explorative trip around Africa, reaching India and coming back. And that is going to begin this age of discovery, where we see many, many explorers from different parts of the world going around the world. And so it was fueled by curiosity, but really enabled by those advanced nautical technology. Again, we addressed those in a previous lesson. But what happens is we move from trade being primarily over land to trade being by sea. So let's look at Columbus. Columbus was not the first European to reach the Americas. There were some Norse settlements that took place in earlier years. However, nothing very substantial and nothing that the world really paid attention to. So when Columbus does reach the New World, That is what's going to begin many more Western routes from Europe. So Spain is going to dominate this early exploration because we're going to see Portugal primarily more focused on going around Africa, and the French and English more being focused on North America. So what we're focusing on in this lesson and our next is going to be the Spanish Empire that took over Central and South America, and that's where Spain is going to be the most dominant. The first encounters, as they're called, between the indigenous peoples of the Americas and Europeans began in 1942 when Columbus and his crew landed in the Caribbean islands. And this is what's really going to mark this period of extraordinary change. Up until he died, he believed he landed in Asia. He never admitted that. His first voyage was fairly small, just 3 ships with 86 sailors. But when he came back to Europe, he expressed, that there was immense gold and amazing opportunities for wealth. And so his second voyage was much larger. It was financed by Spain. And so many, many more sailors came. The initial reactions between our indigenous peoples and Europeans were friendly. Both groups were excited about the trade opportunities. There was a curiosity. But in one of his first letters, or one of his first writings, Columbus says, they should be good and intelligent servants. We're going to talk about these ideas of superiority later, but you can tell from the moment they came on land, there was this element of superiority that the Europeans felt. And so they immediately began to search for gold, and they began to subjugate or enslave the natives right away. Columbus actually left some of his sailors in the islands, in the Caribbean islands, when he left to go back to Spain. And they began to enslave the indigenous peoples, and they were killed for that. But then later, more and more Europeans come, which will make it difficult to resist the Europeans, which we'll talk about again in our next lesson. So what was the Columbian Exchange? I'm marking this as a VIT, a very important term. This is probably the most important term of this entire unit. So APUSH History Unit 1, you have to know the Columbian Exchange. So what is it? The transatlantic exchange of plants, animals, and diseases that occurred after the first European contact with the Americas. So it's referring to goods, people, diseases, things that are going from one hemisphere to the other for the first time. Here's a map where you can see some of these items that are going from the Americas to Europe. And then from Europe, it spreads throughout Asia and also Africa. And then also from Europe, Asia, Africa, over to the Americas. So if we're looking at from America, you can see there are many plants, food crops, animals, not much for disease. And then from Europe, Africa, and Asia to the Americas, again, many, many food crops, many animals, and also you'll see that there are significantly more diseases that are being spread. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. So how did the Columbian Exchange impact Europe? Primarily positive impact. We're going to see that these nutritious food crops did not compete in the soil with the food crops they already had, but they're really complementary, and so it allowed for their farmland to be more productive. And that's going to nourish a worldwide population explosion, not just in Europe, but it gets spread through Africa and Asia as well. We see that labor becomes more specialized. We're going to see that trade will significantly increase. We're going to see people in the lower class gain more opportunities. And we're going to see a shift from feudalism to capitalism. So if you remember in your world history class, that feudal system did not benefit 90% of the population as they would have been the very poor. And so this nutritious food really allowed for class changes to occur in Europe. And here's again just a little picture for you to kind of see how increased population led to increased trade, a division of the population classes. We see more private property, and then we see more rural areas being used. So overall positive impact on Europe and subsequently Africa and Asia. The impact on America, though, and again, this is going to be a brief introduction. The next lesson, we'll dive into it much more. We see that there will be the conquest and Spanish settlements that begin to develop. But the European diseases, the epidemics that spread, are going to have the largest devastating effect overall. Smallpox, measles, etc. Those the indigenous peoples did not have immunities to these diseases, and so it's said that thousands died by the sword, but millions died from disease. It is estimated that 90 to 95% of indigenous peoples were killed just from disease in that 100-year period. So we have a huge loss of life due to these European diseases, and that's going to be the primary reason why the Spanish will be able to conquest in the region so efficiently. Again, we will talk more about this in the next lesson. So overall, the effects of the Columbian Exchange, Europeans will gain power and wealth unimagined, never seen before. We will see the creation of new ethnic groups. So as these conquests develop, we're going to see populations mix between Europeans and indigenous peoples, and we're going to talk about the classes that developed because of that. And as we'll talk about, primarily that will happen through rape, unfortunately. We will see trade shift from land to ocean. That will become the most efficient, the most effective, the most beneficial financially. We see the conquest of indigenous peoples, disease and death being widespread, and then also the transatlantic slave trade. So because of the loss of life that we're going to see happening for indigenous peoples, they will resupply the population with Africans, which again will be part of the lesson where we talk about the conquest that takes place. So we want to take it back. We want to explain the causes of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on Europe and the Americas during the period after 1492. So the causes of the Columbian Exchange, you want to be thinking about what allowed for this to happen, the age of discovery, the early exploration, those 3 Gs. The effects on Europe, you want to think about the positive population growth due to new food groups. And then the Americas is really those devastating effects of the epidemics. So I hope that this lesson was helpful for you. Please like and subscribe below, and feel free to tell your friends.